To talk about some helpful things that help me to enjoy praying, I guess. I've spent my whole life not enjoying praying. You know, it was always a chore. There was never any joy in it. And I tried everything I could think of, and I felt no connection either to God or Jesus or the Spirit or any form of God. And it didn't seem to matter what I did, but also like not only did I not enjoy it, I also never felt like I heard back. Like a couple times, I think over the course of my life, I felt some sort of guidance, some sort of connection, some sort of like, hearing back, I guess. So I wanted to share a couple things that helped me. These may not help you, but they help me, and maybe they will help you. So the first thing that helped me is picturing Jesus as a normal guy. So in my head, I would try and picture walking next to Jesus and maybe him being my friend. And it was so intimidating, just thinking about this perfect person, tall. And I don't know if you've ever been with somebody who's like tall and particularly quiet. Like sometimes it's just intimidating to be around you because even if they are very kind people, being looked down upon is really tough. And so I had a friend, and I don't know why, but her husband just kind of struck me as maybe closer to what Jesus looked like. And he was maybe like 5'7", balding, but a nice guy, as far as I could tell. He was very kind to her and very good to her, and I didn't talk to him much. But just in my head, I started picturing this guy when I was walking next to Jesus, and suddenly it wasn't so intimidating. It was like he was my friend. It was like this could be somebody I would joke around with, Like, there's something about super tall, handsome people that, like, they're just kind of like maybe not the best friends, like maybe just not as fun. Often, like, I don't know, maybe self-absorbed. Not all of them, of course, but, I'm not a huge person. And so sometimes having very large friends is I don't know. It can just be a little bit hard to feel looked down on, and that's not for everyone, but it helped me to just picture Jesus as like a guy that I would hang out with, like a normal guy. Okay, so number two, and this is where things started to really pick up for me, is just as somebody who's very inspired by mythology and the idea of like kings and royalty of old times, not necessarily what's going on today, but the idea of kings in older times and God as king. I started going to God as Father, and I would spend time on my knees, and I really, really enjoyed it. I would be on my knees prostrating myself and just imagining myself before the throne of God. And I would use language like they use. For instance, with a king, they would say, "Your grace." So I would say, "Your grace." And that was very compelling for me and very helpful for me to picture this dynamic. And I started praying for things within God's kingdom. So if I'm a vassal of his, then if I'm going off on a mission or doing something he commanded me to, I would ask him to take care of what's mine, the people I cared about, my animals, and my home, to look after what was mine because they're within his kingdom and he is dominant over all of that. And so if I'm going to be just doing something he's called me to, I would ask him, make sure you look after what's mine so that I can focus on this task and not worry about it. So those were a couple things I would do. I keep tilting this phone upwards. Those are a couple things I would do. And, a lot of it was just picturing it. I really started to enjoy being on my knees at that point because I felt like I understood the connection really well. The third thing that was helpful, and this is much more recent, was I read something around the idea of Jesus being lonely, specifically being lonely in like I think of the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's praying and he takes Peter, James, and John up to pray with him. And he asked them, just stay awake for an hour and pray with me. And then he went on to pray by himself. And he came back and they were asleep. And I think this happened a second time. And he's like, can you please just stay up with me for an hour? And the article by Steve Brown, I think it was, basically pointed out like Jesus was lonely in this. I mean, how hurt would you be if you just asked your friends to stay up an hour and pray with you, and you came back, they were asleep and twice, and he knows he's facing his death. He knows he's facing something really hard for him to go through. And I started thinking about that and thinking about his loneliness. And I almost had this pity for Jesus. And I would get on my knees because it would help me to picture this and just be like, Jesus, I want to be there for you. And I would be driving and just be like, Jesus, I want to be there for you. I just want to hang out with you. I just want to be your friend and be there for you too. And what that weirdly helped me with was letting Jesus be there for me. And it's reversed, right? Like the Bible says we love him because he first loved us. But there's also the sense of I can accept his love because I am showing love towards him. And it just is helpful. And I think helpful is really the earmark that we need to go by here. If it makes me closer to Jesus, then I think that's good theology, frankly. I think it's a good practice if it makes you closer to Jesus. And that definitely helped me. And I think this is the last one, the fourth one, which is, this was just a couple weeks ago. I was on vacation and I spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time walking. And I remember one day in particular, I think it was my birthday. I was just like, I don't really know what to do here. So I'm just going to talk to the Spirit. And so I just like prayed to the Spirit and said, I'm just going to turn. I'm going to walk through the city and I'm going to turn wherever. And I'm going to turn if I think you're telling me to turn. And if I don't know if it's you or not, I'm just going to turn anyway. And if I feel something that's not you, I'm just going to turn anyway. And if I just want to turn, I'm going to turn anyway. And there were a couple turns where I feel like he would say, go one way. And I'd say, but I want to go the other way. And he'd be like, okay, that's fine. I'm still with you. I'm still with you. But then I would turn the way I felt like he was telling me to turn, because I'd be like, well, you told me to turn this way. I want that blessing. I want what you had in store with me. And I knew he would bless me regardless, but I found myself wanting that specific blessing. And maybe for you, if you try this, like, just turn where you need to turn. Because I think the thing we forget is that he is with you and for you, and that you have agency in the relationship with God, Jesus, and the Spirit. There seems to be the sense, we say you become more like Jesus. But don't forget, you are yourself. And when it says become more like Jesus, that doesn't mean you lose your sense of self. What it means is you become the more authentic version of yourself, the truest version of yourself, that the sinless version of yourself, right? If sin is a stain, the unstained version of yourself that God created you to be in the first place. So becoming more like Jesus, becoming free from the stain of this world, actually means that you become more yourself, which is just beautiful. And I think something that we need to keep in mind, because so often that gets lost in the mumbo jumbo of religion and acting well and, not sinning by doing certain actions, and just remembering that it's about your truest self. That's what freedom, I believe, is it's the freedom to be your truest self. The freedom from sin doesn't necessarily mean freedom from doing the wrong thing, because we can't seem to get away from it. But it seems to be the freedom to be your truest self, your freedom from the stain that keeps you from being your truest self. And again, we will never achieve that, but it seems to be something that's like when we talk about purification, that stain starts to fade away, that disease starts to fade away, and so you can be who God meant you to be. There was one other thing I wanted to add here, but it has slipped my mind, so we're just going to let that be okay. So hope this is helpful. You probably, if you're reading this or watching this and you're like, hey, I have some other things that help me. Feel free to try these, but also try what works for you, try new ideas. And if something has worked for you, or even if it's just an idea, I guess drop it in the comments. I'm not trying to farm views. I don't care about engagement. But, just maybe to collect things that are helpful. And to be honest with you, I probably won't read them. I probably won't reply to them. So it's more of a thing that you're doing just to kind of leave a mark in case somebody does find this in the future and they're looking for ways to connect with God and better ways to pray and that sort of thing. So thanks for watching this, I guess. I do all these in one take because otherwise I wouldn't do them. But I don't know that there's anything else to say. May grace go with you, my friends.